Hello and welcome, everybody. This is another edition of the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, along with me, Tim Dennis. It's exciting, Tim. Exciting times are upon us, man.
They are, yes. Yeah.
2019, just 2 days away.
I know.
How exciting. 2019, we are launching into our 13th year. Although I know it's really our 82nd year, but Tim won't want me to believe it. Into our 13th year on the air. With Darkness Radio and Beyond the Darkness. And it seems, right after we kicked the show off back January 1st, 1882, it seemed like that little show that did. And here it is, all these years later. And I just want to take a few moments again to thank you, our amazing listeners all around the world, for the love and support you've shown this show and all of the iterations of the show over the last 13 seasons. So thank you for that. Tim, I'll give you a moment to say your thanks as well, because I know you love these people.
I'm pretty partial to him, Dave. I'll admit I'm warming up to him.
13 years on, you're starting to warm up to the crowd. I like that.
It takes me a while.
And a non-committal.
I want to impart this little bit of wisdom, and it's just a short amount of wisdom here, Dave. I want to take you back to when you were just a little tyke, when you were 9-10 years old, and you're sitting out on the stoop, and you're chewing on a Charleston chew or whatever it is you're doing, and you're sitting there with your buddy, and you say to yourself, man, when I turn 30, I'm going to be really, really old. Do you remember those days?
Yeah, I remember actually physically counting the years to think, boy, 30, that's like 100 years from now. That's going to be, wow, that's crazy. 30. Yeah, I'm 51 now.
Yeah. And the show has just turned 13, which technically is edging towards halfway to 30.
Yeah.
So that means the show itself is getting kind of old.
Well, Tim, to put that back in perspective, you and I have now been friends for 30 years.
Which is old in little kid years.
Yes, even older in old people years, Tim.
It is, yeah.
30 years.
Yeah, it was 30 years as of September of 2018.
Yeah.
But
wow, you remember the exact date?
I do, yeah.
I must have made a real impression on that first date, huh?
I looked into your brown eyes.
Thank you for saying eyes.
Yeah, and eyes, plural. And I said, there's Dave Schrader, and I'm going to be a lifelong friends with that dude.
No, I believe what you said was, ow, ow!
Yeah, I did.
You were deep into Sam Kinison at that point in your life.
Yeah, I was. It's been a wild ride, that's for sure. And looking forward to many more years. And honestly, it has been a wild ride and an enjoyable one at that. And looking forward to many more years. And I do want to thank everybody for taking the ride along with us, because it's not only been an entertaining ride, but been an interesting and educational ride as well. So
very good. Yeah. Very well said. Well, Happy New Year to everybody, as we probably won't be talking to you again until the new year, which will be next weekend, unless, of course, you tune into our brand new True Crime Tuesday. Speaking of True Crime Tuesday, and we're going to get to our guest here in a few moments. Wow. Last week, huh?
Oh, man. I'm telling you.
Last week's show, if you haven't heard it, shame on you. But I'll tell you what, because I love these people, Tim, we're going to, I do have last week's episode, because I think last week's episode kind of transcended itself. I've made it available. I should say I'm going to make it available this Tuesday on YouTube. So for those of you that have been on the fence considering, should you try out True Crime Tuesday? What do these boys bring to the show? I'm going to give you that episode to go check out, and I'll be posting links to it on Facebook and Twitter. For those of you that have been subscribers, thank you so much for supporting our True Crime Tuesday program as well. But that was a weird, uniquely bizarre episode where, very rarely do you get to talk to somebody who kind of is in the same vein as a serial killer without actually having killed anyone.
Yeah.
Knowing that our guest, John Paul Fay, is, has been battling that demon his whole life, but understands that darkness. It was one of the more unique and unusual episodes we've ever done. So we're going to give people a taste. And don't worry, as promised, coming up next week, we're going to do the drawing for $500 of Tim's hard-earned cash. So make sure that you stay subscribed to the show, and we'll have other fun giveaways throughout 2019. But for those of you that stuck with us on True Crime Tuesday, you are in it to win it. We will be doing a drawing, and one of you will win $500 of Tim's hard-earned money.
Now,
You're a good man, Tim.
Keep in mind, I only made $1,900 all year at KNSI, so you're winning roughly a quarter of my earnings at KNSI.
Just well worth it. Well worth it.
Let you know that, yeah.
All right, let's get started in today's show, if you don't mind, Tim.
Sure.
We've got a guest joining us, C.E. Martin. That's his official pen name, but he's allowed us to call him Chuck during the show. Has written a new book called Stranger Than Fiction: A Skeptic's Journey. He is a military veteran, retired criminal investigator, and part-time author. And he's here to share his own strange encounters with us and talking about some of the stories and unusual experiences he's collected over the years. Plus, we have a brand new Theater of the Mind coming up in just a bit. Welcome to the show, Chuck Martin. Thank you for being here today, Chuck.
Thank you, sir.
We do have a link up to the book so people can find it easily on our page. But if you just go over to darknessradio.com and click on today's podcast, or if you're listening to this off of our podcast tool, you've got all that information, including the link for our guest's book. You can find it all there together. So check it out. We've got that link up and available right now. Have you always had a fascination with the supernatural, Chuck, or was this something that came upon you later in life?
It started off with a fascination of fictional supernatural stuff like Night Gallery and Jack the Night Stalker.
Right.
I'm the same age as you. I'm 51. So I grew up in some interesting times in the 70s where there was a lot of good stuff on TV. Leonard Nimoy In Search Of was one of my favorite programs. As I got older, I experienced things during my life that at the time I wasn't sure, did this really happen or did I imagine it? And when I went in the Air Force in the 90s, I heard a lot of stories from other guys who personally experienced things, and then there were stories that were passed on to them. I didn't include those in my book because I wanted to stick to firsthand experiencers.
Right. But was that surprising to you that here you are in the military and you've got, fellow compatriots there that are sharing strange stories?
At first, it wasn't, because a lot of guys are reluctant to tell stories because they don't want to sound crazy. But I worked third shift most of the time, so we're sitting around on an Air Force base. Both bases I was at, McClellan Air Force Base and Rhein-Main Air Force Base in Germany, pretty much shut down at different times during the year. McClellan even more so. Rhein-Main shared runways with the Frankfurt International Airport, so we always had a little bit of traffic, but most of the base was pretty quiet at night. So you just kind of drive around, looking at rabbits running everywhere because they come out at night and telling stories. And I was really surprised by how many of the guys had stories. And then when I got out of the Air Force and came back home.
If I could ask, just out of curiosity, what kind of stories were they relating to? Being part of the Air Force, automatically a lot of people will start assuming that you're talking about unidentified flying objects. But was it a myriad of different kind of experiences?
It was mainly ghost stories. There were a few UFO stories, but the guys that I worked with, not many of them were really into the UFO stuff. Most of them were pretty skeptical. There's one story in the book where I talk about the Rendlesham Forest incident, and the guy who was there wasn't sure if it was ghostly what happened to him or if it was extraterrestrial. But I would say more than anything, it was ghost stories late at night. One of my friends, his stories are in the book. He had ghost and UFO stories. And then I heard stories from people who had heard stories from other people.
And did they know that you kind of had a fascination with this, or did they all just seem to kind of open up to you without even realizing that you were interested?
I don't really remember. At Rhein-Main, we had when I was in the security police, back then it was called security police. Now it's called security forces. One of our traditions was we would do what were called Jeep jokes. A Jeep was a rookie. It means just enough education to perform. And you would play pranks on guys, like send them to a remote corner of the base and tell them to check the fence line sensors. This poor new guy, fresh out of training, would be out there shaking a fence while everybody's laughing at him from a distance because there are no fence line sensors. At Ryan Mine, we
so
had
that was your snipe. That was your snipe hunt.
Oh yeah, we had tons of them, and Excellent. Some of the ones people got in trouble because they went too far. But Ryan Mine had one called the Red-Eyed Monster, and you would warn people, and on night shift, hey, you got to watch out for the Red-Eyed Monster. And then one of the sergeants had a pair of glasses with 2 red lights on either side, and he would spook people. Where the story came from is because there were a lot of wild boar in the forests on the south side of the base. So that was kind of our story. In talking about stuff like that, that was where some of the ghost stories started to come up with. And you work with the same guys night after night after night. And eventually it kind of segued into other stories. And then when I got to California was my second base.
And were you let me ask too, were you a skeptic at that time? Where you'd hear the stories kind of interesting and entertaining, but did you believe what you were hearing?
Well, I believed in ghosts at that point because I may have seen one in my life, and I had a couple other encounters that were.
What do you mean you may have seen one? What was the encounter like?
Well, when I was about 19, I was dating a girl, and she had like a stall behind her house, and she had puppies in it. And I would stay at the house when her grandfather went out of town because her and her grandmother didn't like being alone. It was a really big house, and I worked for her grandfather, so I would stay in a guest room over the weekends or during the week when he had a business trip. And one night she sent me outside because the dogs were going crazy. And when I went out and I was at a stall door, my back is to a big field, and I feel like this weird cold chill pass over me, like coming from the house towards the field. And I thought, well, that's really weird. The wind isn't blowing. It's not really cold. It's summertime. So I turned to look, and out in the middle of the field, there was a small tree. The trunk was about as big as a man's leg. It wasn't very big. And standing behind the tree, it looked like there was somebody all in like transparent white or gray or something. It reminded me more of anything of the little tissue paper ghosts you make when you're in kindergarten, where you ball up tissue paper and put another sheet over it and put a rubber band around the neck. That's something we did in this area. And then when it saw me, it reacted and dove into the ground. Now, I would mow that field a lot because, I was dating the girl. So I was at the house all the time. And I'll mow the yard for you. There's nowhere for it to dive into.
It sounded like a very strange euphemism there for a second, the way you said that, Chuck. I used to plow that field all the time because I was dating that girl.
But the terrain was flat out there. There was nowhere for anybody to hide. And so I just kind of stood there for a few minutes after it was gone. And I thought, did I just see what I thought I just saw? And I thought, well, maybe it was a reflection of light on my glasses. So I stood there for 5 or 6 minutes trying to move my head and my eyes to replicate it. And I couldn't get it to replicate. So I don't know. Maybe it was, it was late at night. Maybe I was tired. Maybe it was light hit my eyes and I had a pareidolia effect where my brain put a ghost out there. Sure. Or maybe I did see something. I really don't know. But incidents like that in my life, I believed in ghosts. I was very skeptical of the UFO stuff, and I still am.
So when you call yourself a skeptic, you're not truly a full-on skeptic. You're a skeptical believer.
Yeah, I believe in the possibility. I just think that a lot of people are mistaken or are, particularly with my law enforcement background, are outright lying. I have a poor opinion of people in general after interviewing suspects and defendants for 20 years.
Oh, understandable.
So, a skeptical believer is my classification. I believe in the possibility, but I don't think it's anywhere remotely as common as people like to say it is.
All right. And now when you kind of review the stories you heard over those years in the service, do you kind of look back at them with the eyes of a former cop as well? Do you see maybe some of these guys were just trying to pull your chain, or do you feel that most of them were being pretty genuine in what they were telling you?
Well, I mean, these were guys I worked with all the time, and there was a couple of stories that I think they were tricked. They really believe it, but it was a prank played on them because we didn't have anything else to do a lot of times on night shift, so we would play pranks on each other. So I don't know. It's hard to say. Some of them I think are are tall tales told to pass the time at night. Others, I don't know, they sound really legitimate to me, and I have a hard time reconciling with that.
Now, you sound very assured that you don't believe in UFOs. What do you make, just out of curiosity, being former military and law enforcement, when you start hearing cases like when they shut down O'Hara Field in Chicago because something was in the sky over it? They never scrambled war jets or anything after it, but they had to shut down the field. They've shut down the airfields in Japan, Paris, Denmark, places like that because of unidentified craft. Do you believe that these are just truly military creations, or what's your take?
I know that the stealth fighter program is older than what the Air Force has officially revealed from talking to guys who guarded them when they were operational before the official time that they were supposedly operational. So I know that a lot of the sightings out west were in fact stealth aircraft and aircraft that were being developed. As far as a lot of the stuff now, it's hard for me to say what's, a fraudulent video and what's a craft of the military. I've not been in that military circle for 20 years now. I'm more willing to believe that it's of the demonic, hallucination induced by a supernatural entity than an extraterrestrial who's taken a trip from 10, 20, 30 or more light years away. If you have the resources to do that, why are you coming here and just snapping a few shots and going back? That's like driving to the Grand Canyon, looking at it, turning around and leave. So I'm very hesitant to believe in extraterrestrials. I'll admit there's a possibility, but I have to go back to my Bible and my Christian beliefs and think, I think it's more, if it's legit, not military stuff, then I think it's supernatural.
All right. So you've kind of collected these stories throughout the years, hearing people and re-examining it. And I'm curious, as law enforcement, were you ever called to a situation that you think may have been paranormal in nature, not an intruder?
No. When I did civilian law enforcement, I was an investigator in the prosecutor's office, and 99% of my investigation was in the prosecutor's office at a desk, reviewing reports, re-interviewing witnesses, interviewing suspects for the first time, kind of giving them a chance to come clean, so we didn't have to file it and drag it all out. Like a lot of times if we wanted restitution for victims, we'd bring somebody in, we'd say, look, this is what we got. You can pay this person back or you can go to jail. It's your choice. So I didn't really get a lot of going out on the scene to anything. I had some people come in and visit me a few times that proclaimed supernatural happenings, but they never came across as credible as the guys in the Air Force. I hate to say it, but when you interview people so many times, I interviewed thousands of people over the years, you spot the crazy eyes. I hate to say it like that, but and we had a lot of mentally disturbed regulars that would come in week after week with some crazy story. So I didn't really encounter much.
Why do you keep looking at Tim when you're saying that?
I didn't really encounter much in the prosecutor's office other than some unusual stories from people. Most of the stuff related to me from others was from guys I worked with in the service. And then ironically, one of the prosecutors that I worked with, who I've been friends with for over 20 years now, he's built a house in the past 10 years and it sounds like it's haunted. He's had some encounters there and he doesn't like to talk about it. It's like pulling teeth to get him to talk about it. So I tend to, maybe it really is. And I've put those stories in the book as well.
All right. Well, let's start talking about some of this. Again, the book is called Stranger Than Fiction, A Skeptic's Journey, and it's a Kindle edition book. You start off with the information that it's estimated that 1 in 5 adults has experienced or knows someone who has experienced something unexplainable. You talk about your skepticism, but the fact that you have had, at least an encounter or two that you put into that category of kind of anomalous and not necessarily easy to describe. I'm curious when you're really kind of sinking into these stories and you start examining, and I'm sure you're looking at all of these different television programs and the documentaries that have been made. Does your natural skepticism kick in on most of these cases, or do you find that, like you're looking at the Patterson Gimlin film and their interviews, what do you make of the stories when you're kind of re-examining these cases years later?
I'm a huge skeptic. I can't help it. It's like when I watch science fiction, I'm a nitpicker. If I see a boom mic or I see a platform pop up that threw an actor, it totally takes me out of it, and I'll start nitpicking at stuff like, hey, that guy's necklace was in his shirt in the scene before, now it's out. Well, the same thing comes to investigations. When I watch them, I'm like, that's not good investigation. Or, look at this person. They're giving off multiple body language indicators that they're lying. I don't like when investigators don't ask the questions they should. They've already reached a conclusion that they believe the person they're speaking to, so they don't really go where they should with their questioning. So whenever I spot stuff like that, it aggravates me. I'm like, why aren't you asking this? Why aren't you asking that? When you take these photos, when I do see good investigation, I appreciate it. Like when people try and come up with like the Nessie lake monster type sightings, they'll try and calculate the size by going back out and recreating the photos. Or Allison Jornlin of the Milwaukee Ghosts organization, she went out and investigated a bunch of the Chicago Mothman sightings and tried to recreate photos. That's good investigation. You can't. That's one of the problems I had in law enforcement was officers would turn a report in, hey, this guy's a dirtbag, let's charge him with this. Well, yeah, but you didn't do the who, what, when, and where in your report. You got to go back and you got to hit all these steps because we have to prove it in trial in the prosecutor's office. We can't just, this guy's a dirtbag, send him to jail. You have to prove they've committed this particular crime. You can't look at their previous history.
Tim and I would be doing time constantly.
So, it's hard to look at these and not be a really big skeptic on a lot of them. I still enjoy them. I enjoy the stories, even if it's one that's completely made up. I still enjoy it, and I read this stuff every day. I really got into reading it once I got into the prosecutor's office because at lunch I would want to take a break. It's depressing to deal with victims all the time, people you can't help, who are never going to get their money back when they've been defrauded by some kind of scam. Right. Or child abuse victims. That's why I ultimately left the prosecutor's office, was I just couldn't take the child abuse cases anymore. So this was a good break for me. I could read about Bigfoot and Nessie and ghosts and ancient America and antediluvian civilizations, everything. I just would voraciously read it all. And it was a great way to clear my mind. And at night, if a case was bothering me, I could lay in bed on my phone or my tablet. And, of course, in the early days, it was my Palm Pilot. Right. And I could read stories that were completely unrelated to criminal justice, and it was fascinating. That's what actually got me into writing fiction was, so many of these you could really expand on and make a great story out of this. Beyond the good story that it already is, you could put more into it. And I've always liked shows like Kolchak and X-Files.
Stranger Than Fiction, A Skeptic's Journey. Chuck Martin is here with us, author C.E. Martin. We do have a link up to that on today's podcast, so you can find the book very easily. Let's hear some of the strange experiences that you've collected through this book, and what made these stand out to you that this was something worthy of putting in the book.
Well, I listen to podcasts now. That's currently I work as a paralegal with a law firm, and I don't have to deal with the public anymore. I just read records and summarize them and analyze records and gather evidence for the attorneys in primarily traffic accident cases. So to kind of stay awake, because reading thousands of pages of medical records at a time can be pretty sleepy, I'll listen to podcasts. And I got into your podcast and Mysterious Universe, Other Side podcast. The more I listened to them, I would hear people talking about, I wish I could see a ghost, or, I wish this could happen, or I interviewed this person and they said this. And I started thinking, well, I've had that happen to me, and I've had that happen to me. And so I sat down almost 2 years ago now and thought, how many of these weird stories could I tell? And I made a list, and I was like, daggone, that's almost enough for a book. Maybe I should start putting this together.
Dadgone, watch your language, man. This is a family show.
So, I just made a list and started writing them out. And as I would write one story, I would remember another. Matter of fact, some of the stories weren't firsthand experiencers. They would be like guys I knew in the service. Hey, let me tell you about this real cool story from this missile base. And they would tell it to me. And some of those I've incorporated into my fiction, but I didn't put into this book because I wanted to stick to a firsthand experiencer. These are guys I personally knew. I went to their house after work, off base. I knew them pretty well. Whereas when I see a TV show and somebody's interviewing somebody who claims their house is haunted, I don't know that person.
Right.
I can go by the regular body language indicators whether or not they're telling the truth, but they could think they're telling the truth and it just be a hallucination or they're mistaken. So I didn't want to include the second hand or third hand or fourth hand, the stories that get passed around. I wanted to stick to firsthand experiencers, myself and my friends and coworkers. And whether it was a good story or not, I tried to put it in here. My own experiences as a child when I didn't really know what to think about this stuff. I saw it on TV, and so I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's just how things are. And then as I got older, I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is not everybody's talking about stuff like this, and this is not supposed to be, well, maybe I'm just imagining things. All the way up through when I was in the Air Force and heard a lot of these stories. Plus, as an adult, you tend to be more critical thinking than when you're a child. And then after my 20 years in law enforcement of analyzing what people have to say and analyzing situations, I could go back and look at older stories or new stories that I heard. And then one of my final stories was one where my dead grandmother came to me in what I think was a dream. I'm not really sure. And gave me some information that actually turned out to come to pass within a couple of weeks of that dream.
And okay, so you have this kind of precognitive dream, but you also have this kind of ghostly visitation dream.
Yeah.
And it did hit spot on. Now, was this something that if you look at it again through the eyes of a skeptic, did she predict the death of a loved one who had been sick for a while, or was this something completely out of the blue?
Well, no, and I could explain it away. I mean, I write fiction, so there's always another explanation. That's the most aggravating thing when I watch a documentary or a movie or TV show and they say, oh, there's no other explanation. It had to be Mothman. Oh, come on. I can come up with all kinds of great stories that would explain this. There's always another explanation. Defense attorneys will tell you that when they're trying to keep their people out of jail. There's always another explanation. But it still makes a good story, and I really don't know. In this particular case, I was really unhappy at the prosecutor's office. I was having nightmares about the child abuse cases. Some of the kids that I would get these reports in every day, they were the same age as my kids. I have 2 daughters, and it was causing me problems. I wanted to leave. At the time, I was writing fiction for a very small audience, but it was bringing in more and more money on the side. First it was pizza money, then it was vacation money. And then I'm like, well, maybe I could make a go of this as a job. So I started planning on retiring after 17 years and leaving, but I didn't know how to tell the prosecutor because he was going to retire. And at that time, the chief deputy prosecutor was going to run in his place. And it was pretty much a given he was going to win. And this is a guy I'd known for years, considered a friend. I'm like, man, I don't want to leave him hanging because now he's going to have to come up with another investigator. But I just can't stay. And I really agonized over how do I tell him? And I had this dream where my grandmother, who died like a year before, came to me and was talking to me and said, hey, you don't need to worry. They've already decided they're going to let you go. I knew what she meant. Anytime that somebody changes office around here, they have a tendency of cleaning house and getting rid of a lot of the previous people and bringing new people on because, we're in a small area and there's favors that have to be paid. People that help you get elected, you got to help them out by giving them jobs or their family members or whatever. And I was like, God, I woke up and when it all came back to me in a flash, when I woke up in the morning, I was like, oh man, this is great. I don't have to tell him. I don't have to worry about this anymore. And I just felt this tremendous relief. And sure enough, within a week or two, they called me back and they'd found out I was planning on leaving. I guess I guess looking into cashing out my retirement kind of gave it away.
Yeah, that could be a tip of the hat.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we talked about it, and I stuck around for like another 2 months and helped train my replacement. And, I left feeling great because I was finally away from it all. So it could have been my subconscious, telling me, hey, you need to just go. There's an election coming up. They're going to replace a bunch of people anyway. I don't know. It wasn't like a normal dream. I never dream about my own house. I always dream of where I would like to live. A bigger house or a log cabin on a lake or something like that. And in this dream, it was my house, my bedroom, my wife laying down asleep next to me, and my grandmother coming in and sitting on the bed. And that's just really a weird, I've never had a dream like that before. And so I don't know if I dreamt it, or I've since read other stories and listened to other stories where people talk about loved ones coming and visiting them kind of like a dream, but it's kind of different. So I'm not sure if that's what I had or if it was just my subconscious trying to make me feel better.
I'll tell you what, we love hearing stories. We love hearing stories from our listeners as well. We do have our Voices from Beyond voicemail at 651-300-4977. And if you guys would like to give us a call and share your paranormal encounters, do that, 651-300-4977 to share your paranormal stories. You have up to 3 minutes to leave a message. You can always call back and leave the rest of your story if you get cut off. We also have a question of the week out there I want to make sure people are aware of. If what was it, Tim? Something along the lines of, if you could talk to an alien, what would be the thing that you would tell them about us, about our planet or so on? What would be your conversation with an alien? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that. 651-300-4977. And you can send your stories in to me at dave@darknessradio.com. And remember, if you write it as a narrative, I want your real life encounters, but if you write it as a narrative, it may be featured in an upcoming edition of Theater of the Mind, just like this next story. So ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's Theater of the Mind.
Today's Theater of the Mind comes from a listener that wishes to remain anonymous. The little girl who wasn't. I lived in a house from hell for 4 years, from age 11 to almost 16. There was constantly something happening in that house. Doors flying open and shut, voices, footsteps. Nothing ever stayed where you put it. I was alone there a lot because both of my parents worked, and I was constantly terrified. One of the most gut-level disturbing things, though, was the little girl in my bathroom. Every time I walked past my bathroom door, which was constantly since it was right outside my bedroom, I saw a little girl with blonde curled hair and a rose-colored dress. She just stood there, staring, looking like a photograph from 1905. I started keeping the door closed so I could walk by without seeing her, but she was always there when I opened it. Once I stepped in past her. I couldn't see her anymore, but I could feel her there. She scared me, but I felt really sorry for her because, well, she was trapped there, just like me, but forever. As the years went by and things in the house continued to get worse, she started seeming darker. I started feeling like she wasn't really a little girl. I knew there was something ugly in that house, and I felt like it was presenting this sympathetic image to me. Then I started thinking I might be completely losing my mind. One day when I was 14, I had a friend from out of town come stay with me for a week. I hadn't told her anything whatsoever about the house because I didn't think she would come if I did. Right after she got there, we were sitting in my room, and she left to go to the bathroom. About a minute later, she walked back in with a puzzled look on her face and said, "So, there's a little girl in your bathroom." Yeah, she kind of hangs out in there. Blonde hair? Curls? Pink dress? Yeah. You know that's really not a little girl, don't you? I almost threw up. I was so relieved, but terrified and excited and ready to run out of that house screaming. She wouldn't use my bathroom the rest of the week, and I started using it as little as possible without pissing off my parents, who did not want to believe. Eventually, we moved out, and I could not have been happier. I distanced myself from it mentally as much as I could. Then, when I was about 18, I took another friend on a road trip to pack up a few things I'd left in that house. My parents hadn't managed to sell it, and wouldn't for 5 more years. The minute we got on the property, my friend seemed uncomfortable. When we came around the bend in the long, steep driveway, he went completely white. I could tell something was wrong, but he insisted he was okay. So we got to work. After a while, he asked to use the bathroom, and I directed him to mine. Not 20 seconds after he left, he came running back in, gasping for breath, slamming the bedroom door behind him. He started babbling about a little blonde girl who isn't really a little girl. All of a sudden, he went dead still, looked me in the eye, and very solemnly said, "She's not happy with you. You left, and you weren't supposed to leave." We threw whatever we could grab in 2 trips in my car. After I walked him to another bathroom and waited outside the door, and then we got the hell out of there at top speed, never to return again.
Beyond the darkness.
We're back. This is the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. You can find us here every Saturday and Sunday, brand new episodes. And Tim and I, again, want to thank you very much for all your support over the last 13 seasons as we kick off into this brand new year. We are excited to be bringing you new topics, new shows, new guests, and just thank you. And please, we just encourage you to continue to share the show. Let others know about the program. Share it with them. And for those of you that are new to the show, if you have a Droid phone or Droid device, make sure you go to the Google Play Store and get the free Darkness Radio app. That will give you access to my show, Midnight in the Desert, Monday through Friday. It'll give you access to Beyond the Darkness every Saturday and Sunday. It'll give you access to True Crime Tuesday every Tuesday. So you can get all of them conveniently placed in one easy-to-use app. Just go check it out at the Google Play Store if you have a Droid device. And Tim, I'm doing it this year. I'm putting out the money. I've been trying for long enough to get it pushed through the right way, and I just can't get an iTunes app. But I'm gonna throw the money out there, and we're gonna get an official iTunes app created and pushed through. It's gonna cost me an arm and part of a leg, but I figure it's worth it. I want to make sure that our iPhone users and friends have access to the show just as easily as our Droid friends. So we're gonna have that up here within the next 2 months. That's my promise to you.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, pretty exciting.
Yeah. All
right. Stranger Than Fiction, A Skeptic's Journey. C.E. Martin is with us, Chuck Martin, and we're talking about his book, his experiences and stories. All right, let's get back into this, Chuck, and tell us a few of your favorite stories from the book, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. My all-time favorite one is got to be from my friend I was stationed with in California. He had been stationed at Nellis Air Force Base. And he, in the book, I identify him as Freddie because I don't want to give his real name. I didn't put it in the book, but I'll go ahead and tell you. Part of his story involves getting chewed out by the men in black because he did something he wasn't supposed to do, trying to chase what could be a UFO or a drone or who knows what. But the story is called The Phantom Rider. And as Freddie would tell me the story, Nellis has a bombing range where aircraft can blow up like old tanks and trucks and stuff like that, hit targets to give pilots more realistic training. Unfortunately, people come out onto the range to, I guess, get pieces of the blown up stuff that they just leave out in the desert. And the security police would have to go out and run people off or arrest them. And he always told the story about this one particular guy they could never catch that they called the Phantom Rider. It was a guy all dressed in black on a black motorcycle. And as the story went, one day he decided he wasn't going to let this guy get away. He was sick and tired of whoever it was coming out there on their dirt bike. So he's in, at that time, I think it was a Reliant K car, Chrysler-made car. This was in the 80s. They weren't very fast. They weren't really meant for off-road or for chasing anybody down. They're more or less to drive from point A to point B on the base. And they chased this guy all over the desert like he was toying with them. They just couldn't quite catch up to him. And they got the radio call, hey, you need to break off, come back to the main part of the base. Do not continue pursuing this guy. As Freddie told the story, the reason why is they were getting close to how should I say this? A secret facility that's near the bomb range that the Air Force has facilities that are so classified that the regular security police don't do the guarding of them. They have their own security forces. During the Cold War, we had a INF treaty facility that was on our base in Rhine Mine, and they had their own security. We weren't allowed to talk about the building. If the building was on fire, we weren't allowed to talk about it on the radio. We pretended it wasn't there. That's apparently common with different Air Force bases to have different facilities like that. So the headquarters didn't want him going near this area with this classified location. So he's being told, return to base, return to base. He didn't want to do it. He was tired of seeing this guy all the time. So they decided to chase this guy. They end up chasing him into an area with a bunch of canyons, and Eddie's thinking, well, I got him now because there's no way out up ahead. It's like a box canyon. We're going to get him. Which, looking back on it now, how would he know it was a box canyon if he was in an area he wasn't supposed to be in? But that's beside the point. As he told the story, they chase this guy. The guy gets around a corner where they lose sight of him for 30 or 40 seconds. They round the corner, and there's nothing there. The walls are 60, 70 feet high, almost vertical walls. There's just nowhere this guy could have gone. He just vanished and completely disappeared. Well, when they get back to base, they're told to go to a room, and there's some guys in black suits, and he and his partner both got chewed out pretty good and told, don't talk about this, don't ever go out there again. You were told not to do this. You're lucky we don't court-martial you, et cetera, et cetera. So I've always really enjoyed that story, and that's one I'm actually trying to incorporate into one of my novels. There's a part 2 to it, however, where a little later on, he saw lights in the desert that he thought was a car. And he, again, decided he was going to go out and chase these lights. And, again, was told, return to base, return to base. After a while of chasing it, his buddy screams out for him to stop. He slams on the brakes, comes to a sliding stop, and realizes that he'd almost driven over like a cliff. Unfortunately, the lights had continued to go like there was a road when there wasn't, just flying out over the lower terrain ahead. And then the two lights separated, one going to the right, one to the left, flew off real far, and then shot straight up into the sky and vanished. So that was his Phantom Rider story. And of all the stories he told, that was by far my favorite.
Now, again, when you hear these kind of stories, what part of the story do you start to try to break down? Or do you just try to absorb the story first, then go back over it and re-examine for any fatal flaws in what's being said?
Well, at the time, I didn't examine it because Freddie was a slightly older guy than me. He'd been in the Air Force a lot longer than I have. I didn't enlist till I was 22. I was a college dropout, and then I decided to go in the service. And I didn't really question him because I'd worked with him so much, and he was such a credible guy, and he was a really good cop. Taught me a lot of stuff because we responded. Security police in the military, or in the Air Force rather, they were broken at the time into two career fields. You had security guys that guarded bombers and missile silos and aircraft, and then you had law enforcement, which is what I did. And we drove around just like a regular city police officer. We had a patrol car, and we responded to fights at the club or domestic fights in the housing areas, things like that. And I learned a lot from him. I really looked up to him. So when he told me this story, I didn't really pick it apart like I would now. Like, well, how would he know it's a box canyon if it's a restricted area that not even he's allowed to go in? But he was very sincere with the story. He wasn't one to tell tall tales. He tended to like more to tell the battle stories, like different fights he'd been in, breaking up fights at the clubs and stuff, arrests he'd made that were interesting. Most of the guys tell stories like that, the ghost stories and the UFO stories and things like that. Those are harder to get out of people. But if you want to hear about how they got in a knockdown, drag out fight and almost broke their finger, they're more than willing to share those stories.
All right. Now, when you're talking to people as well about the paranormal and ghosts and, these different type of encounters, you've already laid out the point that you're not really a big fan of things like UFOs and not necessarily sure you believe in that aspect. What about when somebody starts to relate to you things about creatures, whether it's demonic realm, Bigfoot, fairy folk? What's your take on and your stand on that?
Well, as I talk in the book, I always refer to my Bible. I wasn't really brought up Christian. My parents were divorced. I just kind of turned to the Bible and read it myself. And I like the passages that deal with things like that. Like in the book of Leviticus, there's a passage about the behemoth and the Leviathan. And depending on which translation of the Bible you read, it could be a dinosaur they're talking about. There's the story of Legion, the guy who was possessed by all the demons that Christ ordered the demons to leave his body, and they go into a pack of pigs, and then the pigs run off a cliff and drown. The Bible's got all kinds of supernatural stuff in it, and I always tended to gravitate towards that more, which could have been because I liked Kolchak and Night Gallery and things when I was little. But so when I hear stories like that, I'm not as skeptical on them as I am with the UFO stories. It's not that I don't want to believe they're extraterrestrials and how awesome it would be if there were, and like we could, catch a ride and go check out Mars or some other planet. But the logistics of it seem really questionable to me. It takes 3 or 4 years to get to Alpha Centauri from here at light speed. That's a lot of resources to use to get there, right, even if you could go faster than the speed of light.
Do you believe in these elemental beings, creatures that have always been a part of our world but never necessarily walked the earth in a physical form?
My personal belief, and the one that I worked into as kind of a set of rules for my novels, is that everything is demonic, and it's demons using trickery, like the American Indian coyote trickster. They're just trying to trick and manipulate us by appearing one way at one time and one way at another time to make us believe something other than what the Bible teaches. I know that gets a little preachy, but that's the philosophy I have on it. And my books are by no means overly Christian. I've taken some heat from Christian people because I put biblical things in there, but then I have, supernatural violence going on. But I like pulp novels and men's adventure novels and that style of writing from the 30s all the way up through the 70s. And that's what I try and emulate. That's why I said I have a small audience. Not many people read that kind of fiction anymore. Those stories are much more believable to me about the fairies and the demons and other things than the UFOs. I don't believe little green men or Nordics or reptilians are running around all over the planet secretly doing this, that, and the other. I tend to think it's imagination, exaggeration, or demons.
And in dealing with that, are you, when you're looking at something that's of the demonic realm, personally, have you ever encountered something in your own life that you think kind of falls into that realm? And what was that like?
Well, I've had encounters. I saw the ghost. Over the past, 10 years, as I researched more and more to get ideas for my novels, I've come to the understanding that most ghosts aren't actually dear old dead grandma or Aunt Mildred who's come back to see us. The Bible's very specific about spirit, and it doesn't really talk about deceased people that much coming back to visit. So my viewpoint earlier in life was that there was a little bit of both. Now I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe it's, Bilbo the demon trying to confuse you and appear like your Aunt Mildred when really it's a demon trying to lead you astray. I saw something in a field. Maybe it was a spirit. I prefer to call them spirits rather than demon or ghost or anything else. But maybe it was a spirit, maybe it wasn't. I had an encounter when I was about 6 years old at my grandmother's house, where she had a closet that the door would shut itself all the time. People would be sitting in the living room. It was almost like a child that wasn't getting attention. You'd be talking at one end of the house, and the closet door would slam shut. And when it did it one day when I was about 6, I ran over and tried to open the closet, even though my grandmother and my aunts were telling me, hey, just stay away from that. Just come back over here. I thought it was my uncle who had slipped into the closet when I wasn't looking and was playing a joke on me. And so I tried to twist the knob and get the closet to open. Well, the knob wouldn't budge. And at that time, the doorknobs that we had in this area on secondary doors like that, you had a knob you turned on the inside, and you could put a screwdriver through on the outside to unlock it, like if the door accidentally got locked. Those kind would move like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. You could get a partial rotation if it was locked, and then it would encounter the locking mechanism and it would stop. If somebody's holding a doorknob like that, it won't budge at all. Well, that's what I encountered at that time. And so I'm like, okay, it's Uncle Joe. He's messing with me. So I'm yelling at the door. I know it's you, Uncle Joe. I'm not moving till you come out. You're not tricking me this time. And I sat there for 5 or 6 minutes until he came walking up the basement steps from another room. And was like, what's all the yelling going on up here? I reach up and I touch the door again, and now it just opens up, no problem. And there's nobody in the closet. So my thought at that point, thanks to ABC and how they used to show all the James Bond movies at night, okay, there's a secret panel in here. And Uncle Joe used that to slip out through a secret door into the basement. So I'm beating on the walls of the closet, and I couldn't find anything. And that one really baffled me for years. How did he do this? Because I still just didn't want to believe that a closet door could close itself, or that there was anything completely invisible. As I wrote the book, it hit me finally. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That closet was in a part of the house that had a crawl space, and I didn't check the floor. It's not unreasonable that the floor could have lifted up, and he could have slipped down into the crawl space, got out the door on the back of the house that was to be able to get into the crawl space, wasn't 15 feet away, and then he would have been right next to the back laundry room in the basement, and it would have worked perfectly. So now as I write this book, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That's probably what it was.
You're a little too over analytical, Chuck.
Yeah. I mean, or maybe her house really was haunted, like she said. I mean, I saw that door close 1,000,000 times by itself, right. And it was against the direction that the wind would blow in through the front door. She would leave her front door open and just have a screen door closed to kind of cool the house down. And this was probably, I don't know, 75, 76, something like that, mid to early to mid 70s. And she didn't have an air conditioner, so she would leave windows and everything open. So you get drafts through the house, but the door would close contrary to the draft. And so I don't know. Maybe there was something in that closet messing with me, or maybe it was my uncle messing with me.
Either way, both very strange, unusual stuff. Hey, speaking of strange and unusual, you guys can join me out in New Orleans this coming week, January 4th, 5th, and 6th at the New Orleans Ernest N. Memorial Convention Center in New Orleans. I'll be there for Wizard World Comic Con. I'll be there with Jason Momoa. Not that I want to drop names too much, Tim, but I want to say that after they asked me to join up, Jason Momoa quickly signed up to be a part of the New Orleans event as well.
That's
so
I'm
not saying I'm just saying it's kind of a big shot when it comes to that. But they've got some of the coolest stars. As a matter of fact, they've got original cast members from Charmed who are going to be on there. They've got Mads Mikkelsen from Doctor Strange, Rogue One, Star Wars story, Hannibal TV series. They've got actors and actresses from The Vampire Diaries. As a matter of fact, John Barenthal is going to be there, the Punisher himself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's also from The Walking Dead. I'm going to be hosting a Walking Dead panel, Tim. with a bunch of the celebrities from The Walking Dead. Very excited about that. They've got, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They've got like 9 or 10 Walking Dead celebrities that are going to be on hand for that. They've got Mike Coulter, who plays Luke Cage from The Defenders and the Luke Cage TV series. They've also got cast members from the TV show iZombie. I'm going to be hosting that panel discussion. And, Matt Ryan, my buddy Matt Ryan, John Constantine. I just so many people that are just begging to have me on board, Tim. That's all I can say. Plus, did I mention that Bo Duke is going to be on hand?
Which
Bo
Duke?
It's one of the Dukes. John Schneider is going to be.
Oh, right, okay.
Pa Kent,
the original.
From Smallville, right.
Okay.
So there's a lot of cool people. I'm going to be doing a bunch of panels. Plus, I'm going to be doing some paranormal discussions. As a matter of fact, check this out. On Saturday night, I'm going to be doing a panel discussion with Dark Waters, who's always one of our favorite guests on the show. People love him. Nikki Folsom and New Orleans' very own Bloody Mary is going to be there with us as we're going to talk the New Orleans nightmares, creatures, myths, and voodoo in New Orleans. So it's going to be a great talk. Just a lot of fun stuff. If you want to go, I'll tell you what, Tim, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but I do love these people.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah.
If they want to come to the Wizard World Convention in New Orleans, let me save them 20%. I know I shouldn't do it, but I'm going to, Tim. It comes right off of my cut. Actually, I don't get a cut. I just get to go and have fun with celebrities. But you go to wizardworld.com, and at checkout, make sure that you use Darkness20. No spaces, just DARKNESS 20, and you'll save 20% off the cost of the event. Again, that's January 4th, 5th, and 6th in New Orleans at the Ernest N. Memorial Center in New Orleans this coming weekend. I'm looking forward to be there. I hope you will come say hi. I'm giving away free hugs. As a matter of fact, I'm giving away 2-for-1 hugs, Tim.
Oh, wow.
Since you won't be there, I'm going to give people a hug from you as well.
Oh, I appreciate it.
I'm a giver.
Yeah.
All right, we're back, and our guest this evening is Chuck Martin. Author C.E. Martin, for you fancy folk. He has a new book out called Stranger Than Fiction, A Skeptic's Journey, available on Kindle. And I wanted to get out a couple more of your stories if we could before we have to say goodbye, Chuck. So why don't you hit us up with a couple more of the stories, whether they're in your book or just other favorite stories that you didn't get a chance to put in the book. What are some of the other ones that stand out to you for high strangeness?
Well, my favorite story that was passed on, I didn't hear it from the person who experienced it. It was also from my friend Freddie, the guy who experienced the Phantom Rider. Was a story from a missile base. And I can't remember which one it was because he had been in the Air Force quite a few years when I met him. At that time, the Minuteman missile, the way it works is you have a central bunker that the command and control crew sits in, and then there's security guys in there. And when they launch the missile, it doesn't actually launch from that site. The silos are off at a distance. Whereas like the old Titan missile, the missile itself and the command and control bunker are all one facility. I guess this is done so that if an incoming missile comes in, it can't take out all of our ability to return fire. As he told it, occasionally the actual silos, something would go wrong with the security sensors, and they would have to put what was called a camper van, which was basically like a camper on a truck. And 4 guys would draw straws basically and get stuck out there babysitting the silo all night until the civil engineering guys could come out and repair the alarms and everything to make sure the site was safe. The story that was passed on to him was that at this one particular base, when the morning crew came out, the 4 security guards, security police guys were gone. They had just like abandoned their post to the point that one guy left his shoes behind and 2 of them left their rifles behind, which is huge no-no. As you can imagine, it's a priority resource, a nuclear missile, and the Air Force takes the security of those very, very, very seriously. Not to mention just abandoning your post, even if it was guarding the NCO club. You just don't do that. The 4 airmen were eventually found, and 2 of them were, as the story goes, incoherent, almost to the point of not being able to speak at all, kind of like somebody who's witnessed some extreme trauma and they gibbered. They can't formulate sentences.
Right, like they're just in middle of a pure shock and post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah.
And as the story went, the two guys who could talk were very reluctant to explain why they left. But their final story was there's a cemetery next to one of the missiles, to the missile silo that we're at. If you ever seen the old movie The Day After from the 80s.
I'm still having nightmares about that movie.
Yeah, you could see how the Air Force built silos all over the place. And like if you were a farmer, you could have a silo out in your field and you got money for allowing the government to do that. So a silo could be next door to a cornfield. They could be all over the place. And according to the story, this one was near some real old cemetery. And in the cemetery was a very elaborate headstone that had a statue of Jesus on it that was life-size. And as these guys tell a story, they're sitting around, it's late at night, and they start hearing weird noises coming from the direction of the cemetery. And they look over, and the stone Jesus has come to life and is walking through the cemetery towards them.
What?
That's the story. I can't say whether it's true. The guy that told me the story can't say whether it's true. But all four guys freaked out. The two guys who were up, what they did was you'd have two up, two down. Two guys would walk around in circles and basically, we're still here.
No wonder real Jesus hasn't made a return. The stone Jesus gets people freaking out and screaming. He can't afford to come back too quickly.
Yeah, and that explains why the guy left his boots behind, because it was his turn to be sleeping, and they just all hightailed it and left. I don't know if that story's true or not, but of all the stories I heard in the service, that was by far my favorite, because I'm like, that is a perfect opening for a movie or a novel or whatever. And I actually used that in one of my novels. I wrote one of my series novels is about a haunted missile silo, and I start with that story. I've always really liked that one. And again, I don't give it much credence. I think it's an exaggeration. I never have heard of a security policeman abandoning his post, let alone four guys at once. I don't know if any of that's true or
that's because Tim and I have never had to be security officers. We'd have hightailed it out of there. We'd have Scooby-Dooed it quicker than you could imagine.
Yeah. So that was my favorite story. And then one other story I want to pass on to you. People talk about how they don't believe in ghosts or they don't believe in UFOs or they don't believe in this. When I was a teenager, I didn't believe in hallucinations. I just could not grasp the concept that somebody could – you see in the cartoons, Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam are shipwrecked and they imagine each other as a piece of meat and they're getting hungry. You hear about hallucinations like that where people see something that is so lifelike to them, but it's not what they think it is. And I never believed that until it actually happened to me. It was when I was about, I think 15 or 16, and I'd gone to a summer school in Ohio. At that time, I was in high school, and I took junior ROTC, Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps. It was a class that high school kids can take to prepare for a life in the military. I had wanted to be in the military since I was like 8 years old, and I mentioned a while ago I had dropped out of college. I was actually going to college because I wanted to get a commission and serve in the military. And the girl who I saw the ghost at her house was why that didn't happen. I met this girl and worked for her family and dropped out of school and put all my plans aside. And that was a really bad idea that didn't turn out good. But eventually I enlisted and went in the service anyway. But back to when I went to this summer school, and it was like a mini boot camp where they would show us what it was like to go to boot camp. And to be honest, it was actually harder than the real Air Force basic training that I went to in 1990. But the highlight of that course was a survival training exercise taught by members of the Special Forces. And for 2 days, we lived out in the woods. We had to make a campsite. We had to find food. They taught us how to kill and clean rabbits and a goat and how to catch fish without fishing lines, stuff like that. And their biggest thing was an escape and evasion exercise that took place from midnight to 5 a.m. on a Saturday night. And they put us at one end of a golf course, and they said, you've got to get across this golf course without us finding you. If you do, you pass. If you don't, then we're going to torture you, which was simulated torture. They didn't actually torture anybody. We were high school kids. Long story short, I got separated from my group. I'm belly crawling through all this grass. It had been raining that weekend. I'm freezing cold because I had a T-shirt on and BDU pants and boots. I wasn't properly dressed. And I come out of this waist-high grass into a clearing, and I freeze because in front of me is a giant spider. And when I say a giant spider, I mean, imagine a daddy long legs. I don't know if that's what they're called everywhere in the country. That's what we call them here in southern Indiana. It's a spider with a very small round body and great big long legs, and they're not harmful in the least bit. This one, the body was about the size of a basketball, and its legs reached up about 3 or 4 feet, and then they bent back down and touched the ground, and it was just sitting there. Its body resting on the ground ahead of me, maybe 15, 20 feet away. It was dark out. There wasn't a full moon. It was just, minimal light from the stars. But I could see like hair rustling in the breeze on its body, and I could see the joints on its legs. And I'm freaking out. I'm frozen with fear. The one time in my life where I was so scared I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. But then ration kicked in, and I'm like, there cannot be a giant spider. This is impossible. And as I'm thinking this, I look and I see, there's not just one. There's 30 or 40 of them in this big clearing. They're all just sitting there. And I'm like, this can't, no, there's no such thing as giant spiders. Somehow I managed to get myself moving again, and I kind of scoot along the ground on my butt with my boots forward until I'm right up on this thing, and I kick it, and I'm ready to jump and run like those guys at the missile base. And I realized, oh my God, that's not a spider. That's a bush. The hallucination passed, and I'm looking at some kind of bush with stalks, almost like a corn stalk that had been tied up, and above the string where they'd been tied, they drooped over and touched the ground. And what I thought was a body was just grass and leaves and stuff that had accumulated in the center of these stalks. I don't know what kind of plant it was. I'm not much of a plant guy.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, and at that point, I'm like, oh, crap, I've got hypothermia. They warned us that because it had rained all weekend, if you start showing if this, or this happens, you've got hypothermia, you need to let somebody know. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm done. So I stood up and started walking away. I almost walked into a pond that I thought was a road because at night water can look like pavement. And then I'm like, I need to get some attention here. And so I just started yelling for help, and they came and got me. But ever since then, I'm like, okay, yeah, hallucinations can be amazingly realistic, because that sure looked like a black-bodied spider with long dark gray legs, and all his friends. So I included that in this story because I wanted to. That was, I think, the point in my life where I changed from a believer, where, yeah, man, this stuff's real, or it could be real too. Okay, wait a minute. Just because we see something doesn't mean it's what we think we saw.
And that just shows how fallible we really are. And, I'm fascinated. That's why when you said earlier, whether it's a real story or not, it's kind of intriguing to hear the story, to kind of get the mindset of the person that had the experience. Where did it come from? What did it mean to them? And why did they have it? So it's important to remain skeptical on these kind of cases. Very cool stuff. I hope people will take a look at the book, and I want to thank you for joining us in our final episode of the year and spending a little time. The book, again, is called Stranger Than Fiction, A Skeptic's Journey. Chuck Martin, the author, C.E. Martin. Chuck, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in and being part of the program with us. We've really enjoyed it for the year, and with all the changes made and the fun stuff been going on, we're glad that you're staying with us. We do have some new changes we're going to implement in the new year, including that iOS app that we'll make available hopefully by February. So keep checking for that. And for you Droid users, go to your Google Play Store right now and get the Darkness Radio app and access all of our programs for free that way. So thank you for being a part of the show. Tim, do you have anything else you want to say as we wrap up today's episode?
Just everybody have a happy new year, and do one thing for me. Don't make a New Year's resolution, because we all know that 80% of them fail, and that 99% of these statistics are made up on the spot. So there you go.
That's true. And Tim just obviously made that one up as well.
I did.
Hey, have a lot of love, light, and please, for the love of all, do not drink and drive on New Year's Eve. If you need to, just simply call Tim and he'll come pick you up. His phone number is 612.
Dave,
well, Tim, we love these people. We don't want them driving home drunk.
Yeah,
that wouldn't be right. So it'd be better if Tim picked you up no matter where you are in the United States. Just give him a call at 612.
Dave, there's things like Uber and Lyft and things like that.
But nobody's going to show the kind of care you... And you know what? Calling probably isn't the best way. Maybe you should just text him at 612.
No, Dave.
No?
But there's sober rides out there, and there's buses and stuff like that in your local municipality. There's plenty of other... And I can't get to everybody in one night. I'm not Santa Claus. So, you know.
Really?
I'm just saying that... I don't know
about that. I've never seen both of you in the same place at the same time, Tim.
I don't quite have the beard and the hair, Dave.
Wait, and, Tim, did you hear that? Did you hear that?
What's that?
Dear Dave Schrader, I am sick and tired of you trying to give out Tim's phone number. My one hope is that you will resolve in 2019 to never do this stupid bit again. You suck. Your life sucks. You're bald, fat, and stupid. Your number one fan, Marcia.
Oh, well, thanks, Marcia.
Nice. Yeah, we appreciate that anyway. Well, Marcia, I can't make that promise. Eventually, I'm going to give out Tim's phone number. He's going to let me. And I'll tell you what you can do is call 651-300-4977. That's our Voices from Beyond voicemail.
I thought you were trying to give out my number.
And that's a way to reach Tim instead of calling him on his cell phone at 612. No. I'm just telling him what number not to call, Tim. They can call 651-300-4977 because that's our voicemail, but not 612.
No.
Well, right, but how are they going to know what number not to call if I
don't
give it out?
Don't call my number. That's all. Yeah, you don't have to give it out. Yeah.
Dear Dave, please, for the love of God, stop. Marcia. All right, I will. This time, Marcia. This time. Have a good week, kids. We'll talk to you again next week. And remember to check out True Crime Tuesday this Tuesday for a brand new episode as we launch into our 13th year on the air. For Tim Dennis, I'm Dave Schrader. You've been listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. Don't believe what anybody else tells you. We would never lie to you about that. This is Beyond the Darkness.